हेलो माय डियर फ्रेंड्स, कैसे हैं आप लोग। उम्मीद करती हूँ आप सब अच्छे होंगे। इंट्रोडक्शन ऑफ द बुक थिंक लाइक अ मॉन्क, रिटन बाय जय शेट्टी। ट्रेन योर माइंड फॉर पीस एंड पर्पस एवरी डे। सबसे लास्ट में मैं इंट्रोडक्शन पढ़ रही हूँ। तो इस ये जय शेट्टी ने बुक क्यों लिखी, कैसे लिखी, उसने पूरा डिटेल बताया है। कब शुरू किया उसने, मॉन्क प्रोसेस क्या है, हम देखेंगे बुक के आखिरी में, जो कि फर्स्ट में लिखा हुआ है। मैं पढ़ रही हूँ आखिरी में, ताकि आप भी देख सकें कि क्यों, कैसी लाइफ, कैसा बदलती है लाइफ, कैसा शुरू होता है ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन। ठीक है, मैंने भी पढ़ा नहीं है, मैं वीडियो पे ही पढ़ूँगी। मुझे भी जानना है हाउ ही बिकम द मॉन्क। तो इंट्रोडक्शन। इफ़ यू वांट अ न्यू आइडिया, रीड एन ओल्ड बुक attributed to Ivan Pavlov, among others. When I was 18 years old, in my first year of college at Cass Business School in London, one of my friends asked me to go with him to hear a monk give a talk. I resisted. Why would I want to go hear some monk? I often went to see CEOs, celebrities, and other successful people lecture on campus, but I had zero interest in a monk. I preferred to hear speakers who had actually accomplished things in life. My friend persisted, and then finally I said, as long as we go to a bar afterward, I am in. Falling in love, in an expression used almost exclusively to describe romantic relationships. But that night, as I listened to the monk talk about his experience, I fell in love. The figure on stage was a 30 something Indian man. His head was shaved and he wore a saffron robe. He was intelligent, eloquent, and charismatic. He spoke about the principle of selfless sacrifice. When he said that we should plant trees under whose shade we did not plan to sit, I felt an unfamiliar thrill run through my body. I was especially impressed when I found out that he had been a student of IIT Bombay, which is the MIT of India, and I like MIT. Nearly impossible to get into. He had traded that opportunity to become a monk, walking away from everything that my friends and I were chasing. Either he was crazy or he was on to something. My whole life I did have been fascinated by people who did gone from nothing to something, rags to riches stories. Now, for the first time, I was in the presence of someone who did deliberately done the opposite. He had given up presence of someone who did deliberately done the opposite. Sorry, double हो गई line. He had given up the life the world had told me we should all want. But instead of being an embittered failure, he appeared joyous, confident, and at peace. In fact, he seemed happier than anyone I did ever met. At the age of 18, I had encountered a lot of people who were rich. I did listen to a lot of people who were famous, strong, good looking, all or all three. But I didn't think I did meet anyone who was truly happy. Afterward, I pushed my way through the crowds to tell him how amazing he was and how much he did inspire me. How can I spend more time with you? I heard myself asking. I felt the urge to be around people who had the values I wanted, not the things I wanted. The monk told me that he was traveling and speaking in the UK all that week, and I was welcome to come to the rest of his events. And so I did. My first impression of the monk, whose name was Gauranga Das, was that he was doing something right, and later I will discover that science backs that up. In 2002, a Tibetan monk named Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche traveled from an area just outside Kathmandu, Nepal, to the University of Wisconsin-Madison so that researchers could watch his brain activity while he meditated. The scientist covered the monk's head with a shower cap like a device, an EEG, that had more than 250 tiny wires sticking out of it, each with a sensor that a lab tech attached to his scalp. At the time of the study, the monk had accumulated 62,000 hours of lifetime meditation practice. As a team of scientists, some of them seasoned meditators themselves, rushed, watched from a control room. The monk began the meditation protocol the researchers had designed, alternating between 1 minute of meditating on compassion and a 30-second rest period. He quickly cycled through his pattern 4 times in a row, cued to a translator. The researchers watched in awe at almost the exact moment the monk began his meditation. The EEG registered a sudden and massive spike in activity. The scientists assumed that with such a large quick bump, the monk must have changed position or otherwise moved. Yet, to the observing eye, he remained perfectly still. What was remarkable was not just the consistency of the monk's brain activity turning off and on repeatedly from activity to rest period, but also the fact that he needed to know warm up period. If you are a meditator or have at least tried to calm your brain, you know that typically takes some time to quiet the parade of distracting thoughts that marches through your mind. Rinpoche seemed to need to know such a transition period. Indeed, he seemed to be able to come in and out of a powerful meditative state as easily as flipping a switch. More than 10 years after these initial studies, scans of the 41-year-old monk's brain showed fewer signs of aging than his peers. The researchers said he had the brain of someone 10 years younger. Researchers who scanned Buddhist monk Matthew Richard's brain subsequently labeled him the world's happiest man after they found the highest level of gamma waves associated with attention, memory, learning, and happiness ever recorded by science. One monk who off the charts may seem like an anomaly, but Richards isn't alone. 21 other monks who had their brains scanned during a variety of meditation practices also showed gamma wave level that spiked higher and lasted longer, even during sleep, than other meditators. Why should we think like monks? If you wanted to know how to dominate a basketball court, you might turn to Michael Jordan. If you wanted to innovate, you might investigate Elon Musk. You might study Beyonce to learn how to perform. If you want to train your mind to find peace, calm and purpose, monks are the experts. Brother David Steindl-Rast, a Benedictine monk who confounded gratefulness, org writes, a layperson who is consciously aiming to be continuously alive in the now is a monk. Monks can withstand temptations, refrain from criticizing, deal with pain and anxiety, quiet the ego, and build lives that brim with purpose and meaning. Why shouldn't we learn from the calmest, happiest, most purposeful people on earth? Maybe you are thinking it's easy for monks to be calm, serene, and relaxed. They are hidden away in tranquil settings where they don't have to deal with jobs and romantic partners and rush hour traffic. Maybe you are wondering, how could thinking like a monk help me here in a modern world? First of all, monks weren't born monks. They are people from all sorts of backgrounds who have chosen to transform themselves. Matthew Richards, the world's happiest man, was a biologist in his former life. Andy Puddicombe, co-founder of the meditation app, had his space trained to be in a circus. I know monks who were in finance and in rock bands. They grow up in schools, towns, and cities just like you. You don't need to light candles in your home, walk around barefoot, or post photos of yourself doing tree pose on a mountain top. Becoming a monk is a mindset that anyone can adopt. Like most monks today, I didn't grow up in an ashram. I spent most of my childhood doing an unmonk-like things. Until the age of 14, I was a obedient kid. I grew up in North London with my parents and my younger sister. I am from a middle class Indian family. Like a lot of of parents. Mine were committed to my education and to giving me a shot at a good future. I stayed out of trouble, did well in school, and tried my best to make everybody happy. But when I started secondary school, I took a left turn. I did have been heavy as a child and bullied for it, but now I lost that weight and began playing soccer and rugby. I turned to subjects that traditional Indian parents don't generally favor, like art, design, and philosophy. All this would have been fine, but I also started mixing with the wrong crowd. I became involved in a bunch of bad stuff, experimenting with drugs, fighting, drinking too much. It did not go well. In high school, I was suspended 3 times. Finally, the school asked me to leave. I will change, I promised. If you let me see, I will change. The school let me see, stay, and I cleaned up my act. I will change, I promised. If you let me stay, I will change. The school let me stay, and I cleaned up my act. Finally, in college, I started to notice the value of hard work, sacrifice, discipline, persistence in pursuit of one's goal. The problem was that at the time I didn't have any goals apart from getting a good job, getting married one day, maybe having a family, the usual. I suspected there was something deeper, but I didn't know what it was. By the time Gauranga Das came to speak to at my school, I was primed to explore new ideas, a new model of living, a path that veered from the one everyone, including myself, assumed I would take. I wanted to grow as a person. I didn't want to know humility or compassion and empathy only to abstract concepts. I wanted to live them. I didn't want discipline, character, and integrity to just be things I read about. I want to live them. For the next 4 years, I juggled two worlds, going from bars and steak houses to meditation and sleeping on the floor. In London, I studied management with an emphasis on behavioral science, and interned at a large consulting firm and spent time with my friends and family. And at an ashram in Mumbai, I read and studied Asian texts, spending most of my Christmas and summer holidays living with monks. My values gradually shifted. I found myself wanting to be around monks. In fact, I wanted to immerse myself in the monk mindset more and more. The work I was doing in the corporate world seemed to lack meaning. What was the point if it had no positive impact on anyone? When I graduated from college, I traded my suits for robes and joined the ashram where we slept on the floor and lived out of gym lockers. I lived and traveled across India, the UK, and Europe. I meditated for hours every day and studied Asian scriptures. I had the opportunity to serve with my fellow monks, helping with the ongoing work of transforming an ashram in a village outside Mumbai into an eco friendly spiritual retreat. The Govardhan Eco Village and volunteering with a food program that distributes over 1 million meals a day, Annamrita. If I can learn to think like a monk, anyone can. The Hindu monks I studied with use the Vedas as their foundational text. The title is from the Sanskrit word Veda, meaning knowledge. Sanskrit is an ancient language that the precursor of the most of the languages is spoken in South Asia today. You could argue that philosophy began with this ancient collection of scriptures, which originated in the area that now covers parts of Pakistan, the northwest India. At least 3,000 years ago, they formed the basis of Hinduism. Like Homer's epic poems, the Vedas were first transmitted orally, then eventually written down. But because of the fragility of the materials, palm leaves and birch barks, most of the surviving documents we have are at most a few hundred years old. The Vedas include hymns, historical stories, poems, prayers, chants, ceremonial rituals, and advice for daily life. In my life and in this book, I frequently refer to the Bhagavad Gita, which means Song of God. This is loosely based on the Upanishads writings from around 800 to 400 BCE. The Bhagavad Gita is considered a kind of universal and timeless life manual. The tale isn't told about a monk or meant for a spiritual contest. It's spoken to a married man who happens to be a talented archer. It wasn't intended to apply only to one religion or region, it's for all humanity. Eknath Easwaram, spiritual author and professor who has translated many of Indian sacred texts, including the Bhagavad Gita, calls it India's most important gift to the world. In his 1845 journal, Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "I owed my friend and I owed a magnificent day to the Bhagavad Gita." It was SIC. It was the first of books. It was as in an empire spoke to us, nothing small or unworthy, but large, serene, consistent, the voice of an all intelligence, which is and which in another age and climate had pondered and thus disposed of the same questions which exercises us. It's said that there have been more commentaries written about the Gita than any other scripture. In this book, one of my goals is to help you connect with his timeless wisdom along other ancient teachings that were the basis of my education as a monk and that have significant relevance to the challenges we all face today. What struck me most when I studied monk philosophy is that in the last 3,000 years, humans haven't really changed. Sure, we are taller and on average we live longer, but I was surprised and impressed to find that the monk teachings talk about forgiveness, energy, intentions, living with purpose, and other topics in ways that are as resonant today as they must have been when they were written. Even more impressively, monk wisdom can largely be supported by science. As we see throughout this book for millennia, monks have believed that meditation and mindfulness are beneficial, that gratitude is good for you, that service makes you happier, and more that you will learn in this book. They developed practices around these ideas long before modern science could show or validate them. Albert Einstein said, "If you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough." When I saw how relevant the lessons I was learning were on the modern world, I wanted to dive deeper into them so that I could share them with other people. 3 years after I moved to Mumbai, my teacher Gauranga Das told me he believed I would be of greater value and service if I left the ashram and shared what did I had learned with the world. My 3 years as a monk were like a school of life. It was hard to become a monk and even harder to live. But applying the wisdom of life outside the ashram, the hardest part felt like the final exam. Every day I am finding that the monk mindset works, that ancient wisdom is shockingly relevant today. That is why I am sharing it. These days I still consider myself a monk, though I usually refer to myself as a former monk. Since I am married and monks aren't permitted to marry, if I live in Los Angeles, which people tell me is one of the world capitals of materialism, figure, fantasy, and overall dogginess. But why live in the place that already enlightened now in the world? And in this book I share my takeaways from the life I had lived and what I have learned. This book is completely non-sectarian. It's not some sneaky conversion strategy, I swear. I can also promise that if you engage with the practice and the material I present, you will find real meaning, passion, and purpose in your life. Never before have so many people been so dissatisfied or so preoccupied with chasing happiness. Our culture and media feed us images and concepts about who and what we should be, while holding up models of accomplishment and success, fame, money, glamour, sex. In the end, none of these things can satisfy us. We are simply seek more and more, a circuit that leads to frustration, delusion, disillusion, dissatisfaction, unhappiness, and exhaustion. I like to draw a contrast between the monk mindset and what is often referred to as the monkey mind. Our minds can either elevate us or pull us down. Today, we all struggle with overthinking, procrastination, and anxiety as a result of indulging the monkey mind. The monkey mind switches aimlessly from thought to thought, challenge to challenge, without really solving anything. But we can elevate to the monk mindset by digging down to the root of what we want and creating actionable steps for growth. The monk mindset lifts us out of confusion and distraction and helps us find clarity, meaning, and direction. दिस इज़ मंकी माइंड एंड मॉन्क माइंड। इसको मैं ना स्पेशली शॉर्ट में डालूँगी, अब वहाँ से बार बार देख सकते हैं। Overwhelmed by multiple branches, overwhelmed by multiple branches, focused on the root of the issue. Coast in the passenger seat, live intentionally and consciously. Complains, compares, criticizes, compassionate, caring, collaborative. Overthinks and procrastinates, analyzes and articulates, distracted by small things, disciplined, short term gratification, long term gain, demanding and entitled, enthusiastic, determined, patient, changes on a whim, commits to a mission, will, vision, or goal. Amplifies negatives and fears, works on breaking down negatives and fears, self-centered and obsessed, self-care for service, multitasking, single tasking, controlled by anger, worry and fear, controls and engage energy wisely, does whatever feels good, seeks self-control and mastery, looks for pleasure, looks for meaning, looks for temporary fixes, looks for genuine solutions. Thinking like a monk posits another way of viewing and approaching life, a way of rebellion, detachment, rediscovery, purpose, focus, discipline, and service. The goal of monk thinking is a life free of ego, envy, lust, anxiety, anger, bitterness, baggage. To my mind, adopting the monk mindset isn't just possible, it's necessary. We have no other choice. We need to find calm, stillness, and peace. I vividly remember my first day of monk school. I had just shaved my head, but I wasn't wearing robes yet, and I still looked like I was from London. I noticed a child monk. He can't have been more than 10 years old, teaching a group of 5-year-olds. He had a great aura about him, the poise and confidence of an adult. What are you doing? I asked. He just taught the first class ever, he said, then asked me, what did you learn in your first day of school? I started to learn the alphabet and numbers. What did they learn? The first thing we teach them is how to breathe. Why? I asked. Because the only thing that stays with you from the moment you are born until the moment you die is your breath. All your friends, your family, the country you live in, all of that can change. The one thing that stays with you is your breath. This 10-year-old monk added, when you get stressed, what changes? Your breath. When you get angry, what changes? Your breath. Your breath. We experiences every emotion with the change of the breath. When you learn to navigate and manage your breath, you can navigate any situation in life. Already I was being taught the most important lesson on to focus on the root of things, not the leaf of the tree of symptoms of the problem. And I was learning through direct observation that anybody can be a monk, and if they were only 5 or 10 years old. When we are born, the first thing we must do is breathe. But just as life gets more complicated for that newborn baby, sitting still and breathing can be very challenging. What I hope to do in this book is to show you the monk way. We go to the root of things, go deep into self examination. It is only through this curiosity, thought, effort, and revelation that we find our way to peace, calm, and purpose. Using the wisdom I was given by my teachers in the ashram, I hope to guide you there. In the pages ahead, I will walk you through 3 stages of adapting to the monk mindset. First, we will let go, stripping ourselves from the external influences, internal obstacles, and fears that hold us back. You can think of this as a cleansing that will make you space for growth. Second, we will grow. I will help you reshape your life so that you can make decisions with intention, purpose, and confidence. Finally, we will give looking to the world beyond ourselves, expanding and sharing our sense of gratitude and deeper our relationships. We will share our gifts and love with others and discover the true joy and surprising benefits of service. Along the way, I will introduce you to 3 very different types of meditation that I recommended including in your practice: breathwork, visualization, and sound. All 3 have benefits, but the simplest way to differentiate them is to know that you do breath work for the physical benefits, to find stillness and balance, to calm yourself; visualization for the physical psychological benefits, to heal the past and prepare for the future; and chanting for the psychic benefits. To connect with your deepest self and the universe for real purification, you don't have to meditate to benefit from this book, but if you do, the tools I give you will be sharper. I will go so far as to say that this entire book is a meditation, a reflection on our beliefs and values and intentions, how we see ourselves, how we make decisions, how to train our minds, and our ways to choosing and interacting with people. Achieving such a deep self-awareness is the purpose and reward of a meditation. How would a monk think about this? That may not be a question you ask yourself right now, probably isn't closed at all, but it will be by the end of the book. काफ़ी अच्छा था इंट्रोडक्शन। इसमें से मैं आपको शॉर्ट से डालूँगी ये मंकी माइंड और मॉन्क माइंड का। आप अलग से शॉर्ट्स में देख सकते हैं, और आप लोग मेरे पूरे वीडियो फुल लेंथ तक का देखिए। आपको रीडिंग में, लिसनिंग में मज़ा आएगा, और मुझे कुछ चेंजेस करना है तो आप ज़रूर कमेंट में करके बताइए, ताकि मैं खुद इम्प्रूव हो सकूँ। Changes are very good, transformation is very good. थैंक यू दोस्तों सुनने के लिए और अप्लाई करने के लिए। थैंक यू वेरी मच। बाय।